Welcome to Leading for Life Stories, Season 3. I'm Bob Judson, I'm the host for this podcast, and I'm absolutely delighted to have you here joining me. Regardless of whether you're a seasoned listener who's been with me since the beginning, or whether you've just dropped in for the occasional episode, I really hope you enjoyed the mix of content that I provide, the personal stories, the thematic episodes, and the guests that I have on the show. And I hope you find it all interesting and at least some of it useful. And without further ado, let's go. Welcome back, everybody. It's been on my mind for a while to do a thematic episode about mentoring and coaching for a few reasons, really. One is because I do both, got a lot of experience of both. Two is because they often get mixed up and confused by lots of people in all sorts of organizations. Three is because it's a topic that crops up very regularly in any leadership conversation. And I think, therefore, it's worth spending a little bit of time just talking about it, the value of it, the approach that is necessary, I guess, to do it well. The differences between the two, quite obviously, are worth a bit of time on their own, and all that sort of thing. So I hope it's useful. And as ever, I'm up for feedback and brickbats from anyone that thinks that I'm talking out of my hat, or that they have a different opinion. That's fine too. You're allowed to disagree with me, but I think it's quite an important distinction that often is blurred, and to the detriment of both aspects, actually, because coaches are not mentors and mentors are not coaches. You can intentionally blur the two disciplines. I totally get that. And some do, and I'll come back to that in a little while. But I think, generally speaking, it is important to be clear that they are different, and there are clear differences in terms of expectation, or should be clear differences in terms of expectation if you are the recipient of either mentoring or coaching, so that you know kind of what you're going to get. Because obviously, particularly if you're paying for it, you need to be clear that that's what you're going to get. And I would hope that most professional coaches would be setting that out at the outset of any kind of coaching relationship anyway. And mentors equally would be aware of where some of the limitations of mentoring lie, and where they're straying into coaching. And equally, where the high-end boundaries lie for coaching or mentoring, for that matter. It is not therapy. If you need specific medical therapies and counseling, then that's different. There are different qualifications, different skill sets, different approaches, and different disciplines even within that kind of counseling world. So it's really important to be clear that I'm not talking about counseling. I'm talking very much about executive type coaching or life coaching in the round, and also talking about mentoring in the round for anybody that is more familiar with that. So let's start with mentoring, because I think that's a discipline that is often most used by most people. Certainly my understanding of mentoring is you are sharing your personal expertise and your professional expertise with someone who has less of it generally, and you're growing them by virtue of being able to provide them with your experience, your advice, your thoughts, your wise counsel, all the kind of things that you would hope to get from someone who is experienced in a role and is able to give you a lot of fairly detailed advice and support and help, and be a sounding board for you when you need one, to test your ideas on, to be someone that you can go to when you're newly in a role or newly promoted or any of those things, to turn around and provide you with properly thought through, I guess, advice that is going to help you on your journey. Generally speaking, if you're going to mentor someone, it means you are experienced in what they do. You're not someone who is coming completely cold to this. You are coming from that professional world, or indeed personally, if you're doing some kind of life mentoring, I suppose. You have been down that journey yourself. You're giving them advice and help because you have been there. You know what's going on. You've got personal experience that you can impart. Coaching is something completely different. And it's very important to be aware of that if you are looking for coaching as opposed to mentoring, because too many people potentially blur the two unintentionally, and that's not necessarily very helpful. Mentoring, I think, is really, really important. It's something that anyone should be looking to do in any kind of discipline. You want to have people who are providing you with that kind of wise counsel and advice, because that's how you get better. It gets you feedback. It gets you an opportunity to explore your own ideas before you explore them publicly some of the time, and test them a little bit on people. That's a good thing to do. Reverse mentoring is also in play here, because reverse mentoring is a concept that I think is a lot newer. And typically it's where individuals in organizations look down through the system to people who are either working directly for them or indeed somewhere else in the firm, but at a much lower grade than they are, who can provide basically a view of what you're doing as a leader in the organization. And I actually think that is a great idea for people who are prepared to embrace it. I fully accept that some people might feel that's really uncomfortable and they're not in a world where they think it's appropriate, and therefore they don't want to do it. But actually, if you are a believer in the likes of 360-degree reporting, where you're getting subordinates, peer group, and superiors to help you with assessments and provide a view of your performance, then actually it's the next step, really, in terms of that, to actually turn around and have someone who is literally reverse mentoring you in a private way, where they'll turn around and give you a view of how you're perceived from lower down the organization. And I think that that has real merit to it. But traditionally, obviously, it's not that. It's the other way around. It's the more senior, more experienced, older, often individual who is prepared to turn around and provide their kind of guidance and wise counsel to people who are on their journey up through the firm. I think as an individual looking for mentors, and I've had many mentors over the years who've been outstandingly helpful to me, some of whom have not remotely been formal. I've not said, you're my mentor, but they are providing me with mentoring advice. And again, I think that's really, really common, that you can actually have multiple people who are advising, helping, supporting you, and you may never actually formally say, you're my mentor. Equally, you might. And if you do turn around and say, I want to have a mentor and I'd like it to be you, then make sure you choose well, and somebody who is actually going to be able to give you real honesty. Don't choose someone who's going to potentially just give you diluted feedback that's not terribly helpful to you, because you want clarity. You want to be given corrective action and someone who's prepared to call it out when you need some firmer guidance. And so that's a really important feature of doing that. And that's true for the reverse mentoring as well, by the way. I think if you're going to get people underneath you in the organization to provide some reverse mentoring, pick people who you genuinely think are not going to be sycophants. They're not going to turn around and just tell you what you want to hear and be afraid of giving you any kind of really constructive feedback. You want to be in a position where people are going to be appropriately feeding back to you the sort of stuff that you need to hear, both about you and what you do, but also within the broader organization some of the time as well, because that's the most valuable form in my experience. I think the other thing that people sometimes get wrong is they think that mentors are there for a long time, and they might be. You might have someone who is a mentor for a very long time across your life and across your career, particularly if you stay in the same business and they're in the same business with you and you're just following them up the ladder, as it were. But it's also very, very healthy to choose different ones at different times. And particularly if you're changing role, if you're promoted, those kind of things, to actually turn around and find somebody who is going to give you a different slant and give you a different angle. Because as you build a mentoring relationship over time, that inevitably drifts possibly away from that a little bit. And you want someone with fresh eyes, fresh look, fresh approach to what you're doing to turn around and give you the benefit of their view of you, I think is really important. And equally, you want that different sort of experience. Just surrounding yourself with people who you're really, really comfortable with, you've enjoyed working with for a long period of time, isn't necessarily the most helpful thing in the world. It's the same as a leader when you're looking at people to have in your team. Actually surrounding yourself with people who have different skills to you, different personalities to you, etc., is really, really useful. The same is absolutely true with mentoring, in my view. You're going to get a better output from people who often are going to be more challenging than ones who necessarily just turn around and think like you, act like you, and have the kind of same perspectives. That's not necessarily the most useful thing for you. So that's mentoring, really. And I think it's the simpler of the two disciplines to talk about. It's something that I think everyone in a professional setting should be looking to get. I think even as a life skill, it's something that's really, really useful. If you think about growing up in life, generally speaking, your mentors are your parents for a start, if you have parents who are around and influencing your life. Otherwise, it's other relatives that potentially are there. I look at my own life, my father having died when I was very young, without a doubt, my uncle, who's still alive, is 83 now, was continues to be a fantastic mentor to me and really shaped me as a young man without a shadow of a doubt, and was very, very helpful to my mother, his sister, in doing that. And I think relatives are good at this stuff because that's what you do. You want relatives who are going to be helpful to you and help you grow. It's different when you step into that coaching realm, though. So coaching is a wholly different thing. And I think often people will say, yeah, I've got a coach. And actually they haven't. They've got a mentor. They've got someone who is professionally working with them, who's providing them with advice and support, but in a way that is mentor focused, not coaching focused. Coaches do not provide advice to people that they work with if they're doing pure coaching. Coaches use good open questioning techniques on a systematic method to actually get you to a place individually that you might get to naturally, but it will probably take you longer. Regrettably, coaching is not a regulated profession. So there are plenty of people who call themselves coaches, who charge money for being coaches, who have never done any kind of professional qualification at all in the discipline. I think that's very unfortunate. My advice to you would be, if you are looking at getting a coach, make sure you are getting someone who is qualified and who is in some way affiliated to a coaching body, so that you actually have a view of their competence, and you can ask them about their experience and get a view of what they've done. And it may be you're entirely happy with someone that is less experienced and nonetheless still has the right kind of qualifications and affiliations. Then that's perfectly okay. The chemistry bit is really important, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But having some kind of skill in this space is important. And I think it's important to recognize as a prospective coach that you are not doing yourself any favors if you do not actually go down the route of getting yourself properly qualified here. I remember when I went and did my own coaching qualifications, I realized that a lot of what I'd been doing for many, many years was not really coaching at all. It definitely was mentoring. And therefore, the difference and the I suppose the discipline of focusing on on coaching specifically for a good while to get qualified was really, really valuable. And I would absolutely recommend that to anyone who's thinking about it, doing it as either a full career or as a strand of a portfolio career, because it's well worth it. What should you be looking for and expecting if you're thinking maybe coaching would be useful to me? Do I know enough about it? What do I want to get from it? I think generally, if you have an open mind and a view that you want to accelerate your own performance in whatever it is you do, you are likely to get a lot of good things from coaches, because coaches will generally approach a problem with you in a way that actually does allow you to explore and expand your own thinking in a really, really useful way to you. And I've seen some spectacular kind of light bulb moments with clients of mine. Actually, most of them have been completely out of the blue a little bit and really unexpected and quite startling, but in a very profound way. And it's great to see when it happens. You actually see someone really does, the light comes on, they go, no, okay, I need to do this. Having thought through and gone through the process that I'll come back to in a second. So how do you get yourself to getting a coach? There are lots and lots of ways of doing it. Look people up, look them up on any platform you like. LinkedIn, etc. is a good one. Go through obviously a coaching body to try and find somebody if you want to do that. Recommendation is certainly a very good way of doing that. If you know someone who has been coached by someone and found it really useful, it's worth probably having a look at that particular individual. The thing I do whenever someone approaches me about potentially doing some coaching is the first thing I will do is have a call with them, either physically face-to-face or increasingly these days, obviously virtually. And we'll have what in the trade is really called a chemistry call. And it's called a chemistry call because it's about, do you have any chemistry? Do you have, I suppose, the right rapport quite quickly between the two of you to be confident that you have a decent chance of working successfully together and getting yourself to a position where over some quite lengthy, in-depth, usually very confidential and fully shared discussions, that you've got that kind of trust relationship, you've got the feeling between you that there is a genuine value add cycle that the coach can provide to the coachee, and the coachee can feel that they're actually getting value from the conversation as well. I've worked with quite a few people who, when they've first had these kind of conversations, they've been quite skeptical about what the value is going to be, whether it really is going to be what they hoped it would be, and give them kind of a proper outcome. And often, not 100% of the time, but very often, they are very surprised in a positive way by actually what they get from themselves. I remember recently coaching a lady who, at the end of our very first conversation, she said, I really did not expect to get these kind of outcomes from the very first conversation we've had. And it's been really, really illuminating. And that's great. It's lovely when that kind of thing happens. So the chemistry call is very important. It sets the conditions for what's then going to be a longer term relationship. You should, in that initial call with a coach, be understanding quite clearly what the coach is offering you. They should be setting stuff out in a reasonably formulaic way to be clear what you're going to get and what you're not going to get, and what they expect from you and what you should expect from them, et cetera, et cetera. Usually, you will set up a series of follow-on meetings if the call is successful, and you'll have a variety of ways of approaching that. Different coaches do it differently in terms of length of session, length of duration between sessions, and also just the overall package that they're trying to put together for you. You have to kind of gauge that a little bit by your own means in terms of what you can afford, depending on what it's costing you, but also what you want to get and how quickly you want to progress. Generally speaking, I think it would be fair to say that if you're going to try and make decent progress with a coach, you want to be having pretty regular meetings. So every 2, 3, maximum, I would suggest 4 weeks. If you're leaving it longer than 4 weeks between sessions, that for me feels a bit too long. I would generally say to somebody, I want to start with a package of 4 sessions with them. And those sessions typically are 2 hours long. And it doesn't necessarily mean we use the entire 2 hours. Some of the time we'll be in a position where it goes quicker than that. We've kind of run out of stuff to talk about on a particular topic, and therefore we're closing early. Some of the time, obviously, you're running a bit longer than that. It is definitely a thing that you don't want to be ramming into your diary and being back to back during your day. You want a bit of time to prepare for a coaching session. You want a bit of time after the coaching session to think about what's just happened and to allow you to kind of absorb, reflect, decompress a little bit, because it can feel, and I remember when I was being coached myself and my transition out of the Air Force, it did feel a little bit sitting on the psychiatrist's couch for the time I was doing it. And it was very cathartic in all sorts of ways, and certainly made me think very differently about a range of topics. And that's the whole point. It does test your thinking, stretch your thinking, definitely pushes you out of your comfort zone into your stretch zone sometimes. And you want that. You want to be in a position that it is feeling like, you know, you've had a bit of a go through the ringer, I think, a little bit in some ways. If it's too much of just a casual conversation, perhaps you haven't been expansive enough in terms of what you've been looking at for the approach. In any given session, coaches will often talk about the GROW model. The GROW model is 4 phases, 4 letters. It talks about goals, it talks about reality, it talks about options, and it talks about the way forward. And what you do for any given coaching session is you want to set a goal that you are working towards with that session. You may well have a bigger goal that is actually some long-term objective that then you need to break down into smaller goals and steps along the path to get you there. It is no good trying to, as the expression goes, eat the whole elephant at once. If your goal is to turn around and say, right, I want to run a marathon, and you've never actually set foot outside the house with a pair of running shoes on, you need to think about the steps that are going to get you to that point where actually you can turn around and genuinely complete a marathon. And I use that example because it is very appropriate, because you then need to think about all sorts of elements within that, around diet, around physical fitness, around time management, all those sorts of things that you're going to have to think about in terms of giving yourself the space to successfully complete something like a marathon. typically what you will do is define probably that bigger goal early on. And then you go, right, okay, now for this session, what I want to do is focus on this particular goal. And your coach should hopefully get you to that point. The coach should never be asking you closed questions, yes, no questions. They should always be asking you open questions that make you think about your answer. And they should definitely not be providing you with advice about the answer. Now, sometimes this is where it gets a bit blurry. You may want that. You may actually want that kind of blurring of lines, that you want some coaching, but you also want some mentoring. I would strongly recommend that you need to be clear, and your coach needs to be clear if they're straying into that kind of territory. Okay, let's do a bit of mentoring now. I've got some experience of doing this. Therefore, I'm going to provide you a bit of what I think about what you're talking about, but I am mentoring you now. I'm not coaching you now. If I'm coaching you now, I am typically asking you what, when, where, why, who, how type questions. So those would be all the typical questions that I would be framing about, what's good about this? What's that going to get you? How long are you going to take to get down that path? Why potentially is that going to be really valuable to you? Why questions tend to be the ones that we're most leery of as coaches, because occasionally it can feel a bit judgmental as to why someone is doing something, but they do have their place. Who can help you on this journey? Who can you lean on? And we will usually leave plenty of white space in this conversation. If we test your thinking and make you really think about something, then actually you often will find that the coach will not fill the void. If you're quiet and you're sitting there reflective, then the coach will just let you be reflective, because the idea is we want to let you process what you're thinking about to turn around and get you to that next stage. So having established a goal for a session, what are we actually trying to then do with that goal? We want to look at the reality. Where are you now in terms of being able to go down that path? How far along are you? What does the situation currently look like and feel like for you? And again, this is all through open questions, not through anything else. And then once you've established what that reality is, the next phase is the options phase. The options phase is all about blue skies thinking, making you think about how you get from your present reality towards your goal in a way that looks at every conceivable option, even though some of those options may feel, when you're actually exploring them, as completely implausible. That's not the point. The point is you want to be as expansive as you possibly can to make you think laterally, because often individually what we do, just human nature, is we'll zone in on this is the problem, this is the solution, this is what I'm going to do. But is it actually the best solution? The coach's job is to turn around and make sure you've explored all of the different potential options that could also be solutions to your challenge, and make sure then that you're thinking about how you approach the best way forward once you've decided and narrowed down your options. So typically you'll have a very broad set of options. You then focus in on which are the best of those options. Which one's going to get you there fastest? Which one's going to take the least effort? Which one can you get the most support with? Those kind of things are actually going to be relevant in a coaching conversation with someone. And then, having established which option you're going to pursue, then actually looking at the way forward is the next and final part of this. And that needs to be necessarily action-orientated and time-bounded. And it's very, very important, if you're the coachee here, that you own the actions. A good coach will definitely be pushing you to set yourself dates and times when you're actually going to complete things by, and very clear, actionable steps that you can turn around and measure for yourself. And you're not going to be judged by the coach on this. When you get to your next session, there may well be a conversation about how did you go with the actions from last time. But the reality is it's not to hold you to account or to judge you for your success or failure. The whole point of a coaching session is that you own the outcomes. And if we as coaches provide you with advice, then of course you can take the position that you told me to do that. You provided me with that advice and it didn't work. Whereas actually, if you've come up with the proposition and you own the actions, then you have to own the outcome as well. So that's the whole point, to give you something that you can focus on, to give you a proper focused process that will take you down a path, hopefully more quickly than you would have got there on your own. And that's why coaches do the job that they do. And I hope you can see it is very different from mentoring. Mentors provide advice based on the fact that generally, in fact, almost invariably, they have experience in what they're providing you mentoring on. Coaches don't need to do that. In fact, the other way around. I prefer to coach people who have no kind of relative experience comparable to mine. I try not to coach military people. I have done some, and that's fine. I can do it very successfully, but it is definitely easier to avoid straying accidentally into mentoring if I'm coaching someone who actually I have no professional understanding of what they do whatsoever, because I don't need that. I need to have the right questioning technique and the right approach and the right process to get them to a place where actually they can really get the best from themselves. So again, when you're looking for a coach, if you are looking for a coach, think hard about who you actually want to coach you. It may well be you do want someone who's going to give you a little blend of mentoring and coaching, and therefore you're quite happy to have someone who's got a lot of experience in the world that you live in. It equally may be better to choose someone who's got a completely different path to you and a completely different set of experiences. But the most important thing is that you must have the chemistry to work with them. If you don't have that, finish it at the first conversation, because there's no point trying to persist with a difficult coaching relationship on either side of the table, to be honest. It just doesn't really work, and it doesn't help you as an individual if you're the coachee, and the coach finds it obviously challenging as well to do that. And not all people fit together. I think we all understand that. There are lots of reasons why it is sometimes challenging to make that work. If you're doing the blended thing, be conscious of making sure you know what you want to get. It's too easy to just stray straight into mentoring, just get that kind of tell me what the answer is. If you've got some big problem going on and you just want to lean on someone else for solving your problem, are you actually going to own that outcome as much as if you actually have worked to it yourself? I'm not sure you do. And I think it's powerful. It's at its most powerful when actually you genuinely do focus on the outcomes yourself. To give you a short story to exemplify what I'm talking about, one of my coaching clients, and I'll be deliberately very obscure here because one of the things I haven't mentioned but should be kind of self-evident, I guess, is the trust piece, the confidentiality piece. Coaching is a sort of very, very specific relationship you have, in my view, with someone, and it should be strictly confidential. Obviously, if the coachee wants to talk about what they've had and what's been discussed and all the rest of it, that's up to them. But from a coach's point of view, they should not be discussing any aspect of anything you have talked about with anyone else ever. So the specifics of that are sacred, basically. You keep those conversations entirely private, entirely locked away. If you don't feel you have that relationship with your coach right from the outset, then definitely don't go coaching with that individual, because it's just not going to work. But the example I was going to quote to you is a lady who was challenged in her career. She was finding it quite difficult. She knew, I think in her heart of hearts, even at that point, she knew I need to do something about this and change what I do and change my life. But she didn't really know how to do that, and didn't know how to do it to best effect, and didn't, I think, have the personal confidence to push herself over the line. So when I talk about the light bulb moments, one of the things that was really, really interesting for me was I literally said, as part of this conversation, I said, so what does good look like for you in a year's time? And big pause, lots of white space, which I didn't fill. And she came back with a series of things that all made entire sense. And I said, so which of those do you get by staying where you are now? And there was an even bigger white space pause, which I didn't fill. And eventually she came back with none of them. So my final question is, what are you going to do with that information? And of course, that was the catalyst that allowed herself to she'd effectively given herself permission to think, if I want to get to where I want to get to, and I want the things I want in a year's time, then I need to think about how I'm actually going to do that. And the solution was self-evident. She ended up changing careers and has been very successful in what she's done subsequently, and that's really lovely to see. So my point is, this can be quite surprising for you as an individual. It can equally be quite surprising for the coach. Some of the time you can go through conversations you think will be easy and you get nowhere. Some of the time you can actually go through conversations you think are going to be really, really hard, and you'll have these kind of absolute epiphany moments that are amazing when they happen. So that's it for this week. That was what I wanted to talk about, because I think coaching versus mentoring is a very, very important topic. I think you, in your own career management, in your own team management, if you're a leader, need to think about, what are you providing for your people? Are you providing them with coaching? Are you providing them with mentoring? Do you, as a company, provide coaching for people to give them the chance to actually really uncover their best capabilities? Often coaching is not particularly cheap, certainly not for executives, so companies don't always provide it. If it's there, though, take advantage of it. If you're in a position where you can access it and you can get a coach, use that opportunity. Get yourself a coach. Absolutely take the advantage you can get from those sessions, because it's a shot to nothing for you, really, as an individual. If you go through it and you go, yeah, so much, but I didn't really get that much from it, then, well, okay. That's a perfectly acceptable outcome. But for a lot of people, as I say, you will find it very surprisingly good and very positive. So absolutely explore whether it's an option that you can take up. If you're in the mentoring space as a mentor, just be conscious that you are mentoring. And unless you've got yourself qualified as a coach, don't call yourself a coach. You're definitely doing something that is helping them, providing advice, doing all that stuff that mentors do, which is a very, very important role. But there is a difference between the two disciplines. And unless you intentionally blur them, it's not a great thing to be blurry about it. Once again, I hope that's helpful. Thanks ever so much for listening. As always, I'm always delighted to be still having people listening to me at the end of these podcasts where they do. So all the very best. Speak to you very soon. And that's it for now. Bye. I really hope this has been a useful session for you to look at the differential between coaching and mentoring. I think it is important, as I say. I think it's one of those things that is often not necessarily absorbed by lots of people. And so I hope as a thematic issue, it's something that you can work with. If you find it useful, then please do like it, share it with your friends, and make sure you're commenting on whichever platform you're on. That would be really, really helpful to me. If you're finding this stuff valuable and really you think it's actually payback time, then please consider at least financially supporting the podcast, because that would make a huge difference to me. I don't set out to do this for money per se, but at the same time, it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. So if you're willing to support me a little bit for that, that will be hugely appreciated. You can do that by going to support the show, the link in your podcast platform. That will take you to my Patreon site. You can go there direct by going to www.patreon.com/leading4life. And once you're there, you'll be able to become either a supporter, a champion, or a patron of the show. And for very little money, the price of, or less than the price of, a cup of coffee from a lot of major high street brands these days. Seems like a cup of coffee goes up every time I look at the prices of cups of coffee. Then you'll actually be making a very, very big difference to what I do, and that would be immensely appreciated. But either way, I'm immensely grateful for you listening. Thanks very much indeed. Speak to you again very soon. Bye now.